Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a great morning at the Payments Canada Summit so far, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the panel on sustainable finance for climate transition and adaptation. And this panel is brought to you by the BMO Climate Institute. I'm thrilled to be your moderator for the next hour, and I'm Megan Kells, the head of North American Treasury and Payment Solutions Product Management for BMO. I'd like to welcome our speakers for this morning and ask them to introduce themselves to you, and then we'll get started. And I'll ask the speakers to introduce themselves and their current role, starting with Michael, and then John, then Kian, and then Jamie. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Megan, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Michael Torrance. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer at BMO Financial Group, and I oversee our sustainability work, including around strategy, as well including climate change, and I oversee the Climate Institute that we'll be talking about today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Uren. I head up products and strategy on our sustainable finance team at BMO. And really, we look to mobilize capital to our clients that are pursuing sustainable outcomes. And with that certainly comes working closely with Michael and figuring out ways that we can best support our clients from a sustainable finance perspective.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name's Kian, Kenyon-Dean. I'm on the BMO AI Labs team. My job title is Artificial Intelligence Developer. My role is to develop, research new AI technologies, how they can be integrated into bank processes, and then help to productionize those. So thank you.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Jamie Herring. I'm the president of Climate Engine, and I work closely with Michael and team at BMO around issues of climate and sustainability.
Terrific. Thanks to the four of you. Michael, I'm going to ask you to get us started this morning and kick things off. Could you share an overview of the new BMO Climate Institute and how this is anchored in BMO's purpose and our commitment to the community?
Absolutely. And just at the outset, I'll say that it's a pleasure to really be speaking at Payments Canada event. And this is the inaugural event of the BMO Climate Institute. So it's also exciting in that regard, and to be speaking with our peers and colleagues across the industry. And in terms of what the Climate Institute is and how it came about, I think, as you put it, Megan, it's important to step back to BMO's purpose. So as an organization, we have a purpose and a vision to boldly grow the good in business and in life. And as part of that, our sustainability strategy is a core pillar to how we realize our purpose as an organization. And sustainable finance, mobilizing capital for sustainable outcomes, is a key aspect of that. And we announced recently a renewed $300 billion commitment to sustainable finance. And that's going to be driven by a partnership with our clients. This year, we announced a revitalized and consolidated climate strategy to have an ambition towards net zero, but to achieve that and work towards that critical policy and global goal in partnership with our clients. And so the key theme around it is to be our clients' lead partner in the transition to a net zero world. And like many financial institutions, our journey on climate really started with our own operations and how we've tried to make our own facilities and real estate and our supply chain more energy efficient, to reduce emissions, and then to become carbon neutral, which is something we achieved in 2010, and more recently to match 100% of our energy purchases with renewable energy. But it's evolved for us, as it has for the entire sector, to not just be focused on how we manage our own business, but also to how we deploy capital in the economy to help achieve climate action and the goals of a net zero future. And we'll get into unpacking what that means exactly. But the Climate Institute is one of the major culminations of all of that work that we've done. And it's, I think, hopefully going to be a key tool for us to be able to leverage to support our clients in this journey. Really, climate, we started our climate work around financed emissions and on the capital allocation side with our sustainable finance work, but also on the risk side of our business. So responding to all of the new methodologies and helping to pioneer many of them that are emerging about how banks should analyze climate-related financial risk. And in doing that over the last few years, we've really developed a lot of analytical capability around what does climate change mean, in particular for the economy. And so bringing that together and the partnerships that we've developed through our risk group, through our capital markets teams like John, through our technology teams like Kian is a part of, the AI Labs, we've decided that we need to bring together, consolidate, and really accelerate that work, both to respond to imperatives like regulatory developments and to respond to stakeholder expectations of us, particularly investors and civil society, but also to be able to catalyze that work and bring it to the advantage of our clients. And so the Climate Institute is going to do just that. And it will be a cross-functional virtual network within our organization that will be bringing together our capabilities on modeling and understanding both transition, physical risk, and the economic implications of climate change, and to develop analytical tools and insights that we can bring both for the benefit of our internal teams working on this topic as well as our clients. So that's what really we want to present to our industry peers today, is the work of that institute and one of the leading case studies that we've developed so far on how we're going to do that and operationalize it.
That's great, Michael. It really sets the stage and the foundation of what the Institute is all about. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what a net zero world means and how you're going about partnering with clients to support them in these efforts?
Well, net zero comes from the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. And it's really about a future state of the world where there are no more greenhouse gas emissions going into the atmosphere than are being taken out. And that is going to require very significant transformations across our entire economy, across consumer behavior, and it will affect, every aspect of our clients' businesses and lives over time. We want this transition, though, to not be disorderly and to be done in a way that we don't have other necessary goals achieved, like growth and economic well-being and community well-being. So we have to do this in a deliberate and an intelligent way, in a way that responds to people's needs and communities' needs over time. So there's really three dimensions, I think, of net zero that affects our clients. One is around the implications of transition from an economic perspective, from a policy perspective. So things like consumer buying behavior or consumption patterns or government policy, that is going to have a significant impact on our clients and customers in and of itself. And so understanding what that transition will look like and then helping to navigate that transition through our support as a financial institution is one key pillar. The other piece of it is that there is some climate change that is going to be inevitable. And that means that there are going to be some physical hazard implications of climate change. So as temperatures rise or there's increasing fluctuation in terms of temperatures, you'll have extreme weather events become potentially more frequent. You could have drought, flooding, fire hazards become increasingly prevalent. And then that will create economic implications that can have cascading effects, both for our clients and customers, organizations or personal lives, or across the economy more broadly. So we feel that it's critical for us to be very capable of advising ourselves and our customers and clients on that topic as well. The third piece is around strategy to me. And both of those aspects I've discussed will have implications for how particularly our corporate clients have to think about how their businesses will evolve in the coming years and decades. And so that's another role that I think net zero becomes critical for integration of these ideas into business strategy, and for us as a financial institution to be able to advise our clients on how to think about that. And that's where I think, the Climate Institute in and of itself, in terms of the analytical capability that we're bringing forward and really going to be, thought leadership, bringing forward thought leadership and also an industry leading capability in that regard, will be really critical for us to understand the problem and then to also work towards the solutions. And then sustainable finance becomes a mechanism for the deployment of capital towards innovation and to align finance with climate action and climate goals. And so maybe that's a good segue. I'll hand it back to you, because I know we're going to get into the discussion from John about exactly how we've been doing that and what we intend to do going forward.
Thanks, Michael. That's great. Yes, why don't we turn over to John and dig into that a little bit more. John, can you describe for us what sustainable finance is, the approach you're taking, and how this links overall to the climate action imperative?
Sure. Thanks, Megan. Let me start by saying there's no one perfect definition of sustainable finance. When I think of it, it's, on the one hand, how can we get capital to companies, as Michael was alluding to, in a way that helps them transition to a lower carbon future, or helps them mitigate some of the climate risk that they're facing or will be facing in future years. So that's sustainable finance, as a lot of people are starting to understand it. But then there's also the sort of more traditional look at what is sustainable business, and thinking a lot about, we can only be supporting our businesses if they are indeed in business for the next 200 years. And so how do we then support our companies in a way that makes them sort of big S sustainable, that helps them grow, helps them remain profitable, helps them build into the communities? And to me, the new age sustainable finance and business sustainability, these aren't mutually exclusive, right? The way that we support our clients by providing them with products and solutions that help them deal with the coming climate crisis, or the current climate crisis, that help them mitigate different regulatory risks going forward, or different risks that they can expect to see through their supply chains or through their operations. That's what this is all about. And so when we sit down with a client, we're not wearing a sustainable finance hat and saying, let's look at this in a vacuum. It's saying, let's look at your overall business model over the next 20, 30, 50 years. We want to make sure that as your trusted advisor, as your bank, as your lender, we want to make sure we are supporting you along that road and along that strategy. It's this triple bottom line concept, right? Where, historically there's been such a focus on economic returns and building shareholder value. Now there's more of a focus on sort of two other pillars around economic and social considerations as well. And really, those that do it well, the economic and social, will build, environmental and social will also build their, economic bottom line. Mike was alluding to this as well, around sort of moving from risk to opportunity. So, historically, environmental risk was very much a risk that businesses faced. If they didn't account for, flooding or drought or, increasingly forest fires, that could pose a fundamental risk to their business. The way we see it within our finance team is saying, okay, I acknowledge that that is still the case, and there are material risks that businesses face, but there's also opportunity associated with doing ESG, or being a ESG star, doing things well vis-a-vis your peers. And it's not just us as your lender or your bank saying, hey, we want you to be better in these areas because we've made this net zero commitment. That's not it at all. We are responding to, and our clients are hearing from, investors, other shareholders, customers, regulators, up and down their supply chain. They're hearing that they need to be focused on and prioritizing different ESG or sustainable finance type considerations. And at BMO, we want to be the solution. We want to be at the table and brainstorming and structuring different products and solutions that will help them, that'll help our clients. So, for instance, sustainable debt products, green loans, sustainability linked loans, green bonds. We've structured a number of products for clients where, actual environmental or social outcomes or improvements were tied to the cost of capital or the cost of financing. So we structured the first sustainability linked loan in Canadian history for Maple Leaf Foods back in December 2019. And under this SLL, sustainability linked loan, the interest rate margin that Maple Leaf paid could actually decrease if they achieved certain environmental targets related to water, waste, electricity usage, as well as remaining carbon neutral. Similarly, earlier this year, we structured the first labeled green loan in Canadian history for Atlantic Packaging. And they were using proceeds from this loan to build 100% facility. It was a great outcome for us. Able to tie a loan and tie financing specifically to their green use of proceeds and help them structure around exactly what that solution can look like. This is the way that we envision working with our clients, not only today, but for the next 200 years. And I think we have a great opportunity in North America and in Canada, this very resource intensive economy, to say, look, we acknowledge that not all of our sectors are pure green. I would love to say that we were, the world leader in solar panels and wind farms. We're not. But if we look at, our energy sector, or mining and metals sector, or agriculture sector, these are really important sectors within our economy, and ones that we've supported for 200 years as BMO. We want to be at the table to support them for the next 200. And that means really focusing on what do you need from a finance perspective, from an advisory perspective, from a strategy perspective. How can we bring solutions to you that help align with your corporate strategy? I can tell you, we don't have a conversation today with a client where they aren't thinking about ESG or sustainability in some capacity, but thinking about it is different than having the answer to, or solutions or best practices around what the art of the possible is. And that's really where we can sort of fill that middle void and say, through the Climate Institute and through our overall focus and priority on sustainable finance, we can build solutions that align with your business strategy.
That's great, John. Thanks very much for all that detail on the BMO journey. So Jamie, I'm going to turn to you. Could you share with us how your team has partnered specifically with BMO and other financial institutions on sustainability and their efforts on climate change?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you so much to Michael and team for having me, and thank you all for joining. Yeah, I mean, it's really an incredibly exciting time, I think, in this journey towards sustainability. I feel like we're at this really important juncture in time where, financial institutions are beginning to acknowledge the existential risk that climate change poses, not just to our social and environmental systems, but to our financial systems themselves. And so our work with BMO is really coming in two different areas, as John was alluding to. There's the actual risk. And the actual risk side is real. And it's something that, in terms of climate change is happening now, and we're witnessing that now, and that risk is now. And a lot of different financial institutions don't necessarily incorporate those risks into their loans, into their financial operations. So really understanding what that risk is now, and then what that risk is going to be in the future. So with climate change, what we're expecting to see is, we're witnessing all these major changes in terms of changes in precipitation, heat, flooding, drought, all these different environmental factors. And what we know for sure in terms of the climate science is that these events are going to get more severe and more frequent over time. And that really is an existential risk, in terms of financial institutions. Because debtors may not be able to actually pay back those loans depending on those levels of risk that they're seeing in those impacts. So there's the risk side, understanding the risk side, and what John's alluding to too, and this is the really exciting side, are the opportunities, and the opportunities for sustainable transformation. And I think reducing risk and building sustainable transformations, they're kind of two sides of the same coin. They both have to happen at the same time. Right. So we're trying to reduce this existential threat that we're facing. And to do that, we've got to reduce our risks, but also increase and improve the sustainability of our practices. So where we're focused on, and this is the real innovation and really excited about working with the Climate Institute at BMO about this, is utilizing not just these long-term projections. So in the climate world, we as climate scientists, we usually think about the 20, 30, 40, 50-year time horizons, but really recognizing that the actions that have to happen, they have to happen now and in the here and now. So what we're doing with the Climate Institute is really looking at leveraging Earth observation data. So now one great function and a really exciting opportunity is that there's thousands of satellites being launched now, which are taking pictures at really high resolutions of everywhere around the planet every single day. We have sensors all over the place monitoring the environment. And so what we can do now is pull all that data and make it available for financial institutions to make decisions on. right? So these sustainably backed loans or these green bonds, whatever those might be, there's the opportunity now to actually monitor what's happening on the ground and link the activities on the ground to an actual financial instrument. And I think that's one really exciting lever of power from an environmental and sustainability perspective, where organizations and companies that are being supported by the bank can actually flourish under these conditions, by linking their activities directly to a financial product, and then leveraging this incredible amount of monitoring that's happening on the planet to those activities on the ground. So I think that's a truly transformational potential activity. And yeah, really excited about the Climate Institute and its willingness to work in that area.
That's great, Jamie. Thank you. And also for framing up how necessary innovation is to really beget big change.
Absolutely.
So Kian, turning to you, could you share with us specifically the innovation you're doing with BMO on BMO's Client Engine platform?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we started off with a general goal of modeling physical climate risk. And the project started off from kind of humble beginnings. We didn't know exactly what we were going to be making from day one. This is very new, innovative technology. But over time, we worked with satellite data. We read the literature, we figured out how to implement flood detection algorithms. And we found it was a very hard problem. And fortunately, we were able to find Jamie and his company, Climate Engine, that we could work with Climate Engine directly, PhD experts, to help solve this problem. And so we've been developing the BMO Climate Engine platform for quite a time now. And it really, fundamentally, it uses data-driven facts given by high-quality geospatial climate hazard satellite data to determine where severe climate change events will impact the geography, but in particular BMO the hardest. So for example, if we had been able to anticipate in advance the 2013 Toronto floods, which caused over $1 billion in property damage throughout all of Toronto, or the 2016 Fort McMurray wildfires, which caused over $9 billion in property damage, if we had been able to anticipate those in advance, we would have been able to help BMO's clients avoid the worst aspects of those damaging events. And so my team, the BMO AI Labs team, is working hand in hand with Michael and the sustainability team and Climate Engine to develop a platform to do exactly that, to be forward-looking, to anticipate the major weather events before they happen, and to understand where BMO's clients are most at risk to climate change events, such as droughts, floods, wildfires, hurricanes, and other extreme weather. Indeed, given that all of the world's leading scientists expect that severe weather events will only become more severe as global temperatures and climate change worsens, it's clear that it's even more urgent and more imperative for us to develop this platform with pace. And not only the platform, but also business use cases. And so for that, we have a very multidisciplinary team. I've never been on a team more multidisciplinary than this one. In fact, we have many, many talented individuals from all walks of life on this project, assessing, projecting, and explaining the impact of major climate change events. And to do this and to work with BMO's clients for this requires many different skills. From the technology side, we have my team that AI, specialized in AI and general computer science algorithms, but we also have cloud expertise, cloud engineers, cloud architects, so that we can make an online platform that's accessible and secure. And of course, we have the sophisticated climate science provided by the partners at Climate Engine, whose decades of doctoral experience, PhDs, and various types of climate science allows us to ensure that our data is of the highest caliber and that the methodology is very defensible. And this multidisciplinary aspect goes beyond the technology side. I think what's very crucial for a project like this is connecting with business teams, connecting with risk teams within the bank to ensure that the technology has real impactful use cases. We've pursued a product-oriented mentality in developing it. We've in constant connection, constant workflows and work streams with our retail mortgage teams, with credit risk teams, real estate investment, stress testing teams, and more, to ensure that the platform we develop is aligned to impactful and actionable use cases. So to conclude, for BMO, climate strategy is fundamentally a business strategy. It's an opportunity to build our reputation as industry leaders and drive deep client relationships through the transition to a net zero world. And that's what we're doing. We're leveraging our multidisciplinary team's expertise, our technology skills, our financial commitments to support our clients and to drive solutions to mitigate the worst impacts of major climate events and to do our part to help achieve a net zero world.
Thanks, Kian, for digging into the innovation. Why don't we do a little bit of a one-click down on the use case, and we'll start with John and then maybe go to Michael. So John, how do you see these capabilities being leveraged for finance in general? Where is this going?
Well, I love the multidisciplinary approach that Kian was talking about, because to me, that means you have all these different voices and people and thoughts around the table, and it creates the best types of outcomes. And frankly, to link it to finance, in some cases, requires some creativity, but that's what we're here for. And so in terms of use cases, I mentioned the Maple Leaf example earlier with the sustainability linked loan. Imagine we could sit down with a client and say, energy usage is a key ESG risk you're facing. We have figured out ways to actually decrease your energy use. It's going to help your bottom line because it's going to, save you money, but it's also going to lower your carbon footprint as well. And it's one thing for, if that client has a large sustainability or corporate responsibility team that can then sort of dig in and figure out ways to actually sort of transition off natural gas into renewable energy. It's a totally other situation if we can bring them that solution and say, through the geospatial data that we've analyzed, we actually know where your biggest risks lie from an operational perspective. We know which plants of yours use the most electricity. Here's where you ought to be focusing. And then one other element of our team is we have an impact investment fund where we invest in early stage clean tech companies. What if we could then bring them a clean tech company that is solving for exactly the challenge that they're facing? So it's this 360 approach, and in that example, and sort of what I was alluding to with Maple Leaf, they're the most sustainable protein company in the world. They've been focusing on ESG and sustainable finance for decades, but not every client's in the same situation. So a lot of, especially our small and medium enterprises, medium-sized enterprises just don't necessarily have a fulsome ESG team and don't even know where to start when it comes to some of these solutions. And that's an area where I think the Climate Institute could really dig in and roll up its sleeves and provide major value. Other sectors as well just sort of jump off the page in my mind for use cases. I mentioned agriculture earlier, but what if we could sit down with our farming groups and think about things like water efficiency or reforestation, deforestation, or best fishing practices, or cover crops, or whatever it is. What if we could help them design the most optimal use of their limited resources in a way that enhances efficiencies, creates a good economic outcome, but also creates a really positive environmental outcome as well. Similarly, across supply chains generally, and this obviously hits every client. If I'm a Walmart or an Amazon, as an example, I want to know which of my distribution facilities or which of my suppliers are on coastlines. I want to know which ones are prone potentially to drought or forest fires, et cetera, because that can cause major disruptions in my first in, first out inventory mechanism. And so I think those types of large scale purchasers as well are really going to be interested in some of the analysis that will be coming out of the Climate Institute. And then you have a company like Tesla, where a lot goes into the mining of batteries and lithium and cobalt far before that electric vehicle is ever driven off the lot. And increasingly, we want to know, and suppliers and investors want to know exactly how that cobalt's being mined, exactly what the environmental output or externality associated with the mining of that mineral is, because it's not enough just to blindly say, well, I drive an electric vehicle, therefore I care about the environment. This entire supply chain focus is really critical. And then finally, I just wrap up by, I mentioned earlier the energy sector as well. And obviously with, Exxon Mobil recently being in the news with a bit of a shuffle at the board, as well as Shell recently being in the news with a court case out of Holland that requires them to reduce their GHG emissions. It's very front of mind for our energy clients. And so, how can we then work with them? And Kian was making this point to really focus on areas where we can help them improve. They're having the conversations anyway to say, how do we set ourselves up from an ESG perspective for the future? We care about it. Our investors and shareholders certainly do as well. So then how can we bring them solutions to say, we can be there along the way. We want to continue supporting you, but with an eye to transitioning your business, not just for environmental or social or governance reasons, but for economic reasons into the future.
Thanks, John. Michael, do you want to add a few things?
Sure. I mean, thank you, first of all, to Jamie, Kian, and John for their great discussions. I mean, it's just really, it's inspiring to just hear it sort of played back, all of the work that we're doing. And I mean, to put it in context about the cross-functional teams point, Jamie himself is a scientist. He's overseeing a team of scientists, including some who advise NASA, the US government, Canadian government. And just to think how innovative we can be to bring that kind of perspective and deep analytical insights, and as they say, their data lake of geospatial data, climate models, other kinds of scientific modeling to derive insights, bring that into a banking context, and then to have experts like Kian and the AI Labs team with such deep technological capability and the ability to integrate and ingest all of that complex information, and then to leverage it for finance, and then the work that John is doing. I mean, it's such a huge challenge that we have to address climate change, and that kind of breaking down of barriers and silos and collaboration and trying to find solutions, I think, is going to be so integral. So, we hope that we can play a leadership role in terms of building that kind of a vision for what it'll take to address this issue. And I also would want to emphasize that really it's coming about because of a top level commitment. So this is something that's really being driven by our CEO and an awareness of our executive team that this is a critical topic that we want to play a leadership role on. So, John's explained a lot of the interesting use cases. I mean, really what it comes down to, there's an idea that came out of Oxford University around spatial finance. And that's really, I think, the kind of the core concept that we're working with here, that we can leverage these kinds of tools and integrate them into financial instruments to try to achieve better, more objectively verifiable outcomes that align with sustainability goals. So that's a critical piece of it. On the risk side, we're leveraging this technology for responding to climate-related financial risk and scenario analysis work. And then we're also leveraging it in parts of the business that are trying to bring thought leadership and deep research-based insights to our clients. Those are just some of the beginning use cases that we're developing. But really, I think the sky will be the limit, literally and figuratively, as to what we can do here. And this is one aspect of the Climate Institute's work. We're also going to be doing a lot more work around the economic side of this equation and the modeling and insights that we'll need to understand the nature of the transition and integrate that into how we advise clients in terms of their strategic investments. So I think you can kind of see the picture we're painting here. It's bringing together a lot of different concepts and a lot of different tools to all address this critical problem of our time related to climate change.
Thanks, Michael. Now is the fun part for your questions at the summit. So I think you've got the instructions to put them into the chat, and we've got probably about 15 minutes to take your questions with the panel today. And as Michael, Kian, John, and Jamie have all shared, lots and lots of perspectives are needed to advance our efforts here. So you'll be able to call on these 4 experts to get your questions answered. So I'm just going to look to the moderator for Payments Canada to throw up our first question, and then we'll get started. No questions yet. We have a bit of a shy group this afternoon. So just while we're waiting for the first questions to pop up, could you talk more about the ESG and climate perspectives related to housing? Does anybody want to take that one? Michael?
I can take that. It's one of the key aspects of it is going to be around climate adaptation. And, and it's surprising to me, at least, the more I learn about it, how subtle the solutions can be, that it doesn't always involve catastrophic issues. But, you know, the essence of the challenge is that over time, as climate change happens, and some of it is inevitable, there will be increased risks to any kind of physical assets, including our own homes, from things like flooding, fire, other kinds of issues, water availability in some regions. On the flooding point, for example, there's been some great research out of the Intact Center for Climate Adaptation at the University of Waterloo, where they've done studies about the effect on home values of increased flood risks over time. And if that's any indication, you know, this is an issue that is important to homeowners, but it's also important to governments, to insurers, and to mortgage providers or financial institutions like us. And one other thing that they've found in their studies is that very small investments of a few $100s or a couple of $1,000s can actually mitigate these risks drastically. And so one of the key things that we're thinking about, and we've begun to do through education to our clients, is to make them aware of this and some of the steps that they can take to better manage and mitigate these kinds of risks that can affect the biggest investment they'll probably have in their lives. And so we've been working with our mortgage teams and our personal and commercial banking teams to try to identify these kinds of issues, disseminate information to clients. But I think taking it to the next level will be to actually be able to give more property specific advice to our clients based on the actual risks that you know, the best available scientific evidence can provide to them. And that's, again, where we want to go with our analytical capabilities.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. I'll just look to our moderator now to see if there's any other questions. In case there's not, I'll ask the four of you if there's any parting words you want to share before we wrap up, in case the group continues to be shy this afternoon. No questions yet. Nothing new. Any last words from the four of you? And then maybe we'll give people 15 minutes back before they go to their next session.
I'll let my colleagues go first.
Sure.
I'm always happy to talk about what we can do. So let me jump in really quickly. But thanks, Michael, Kian, John, Megan, for moderating. You know, one of the things that strikes me as a challenge, but also exciting, is, you know, to address climate and sustainability issues. This is really an all hands on deck challenge. You know, and I think some of the conversations we've been hearing just about, you know, how deeply this permeates, both in terms of actual risk, but then actual opportunities as well. It really does touch upon almost every single sector, almost every single industry, you know, in the world, and down to, you know, an actual person's house, to these, you know, large multinational sort of risks and portfolios and extensions. So I'm really, really, really encouraged, more encouraged than I have been in years, actually. You know, specifically with this commitment that BMO is providing to the Climate Institute, that we can actually do this. Because I think the financial institutions are really in a unique position, because just as all these risks exist everywhere, the financial institutions also have a part to play in almost every aspect of our lives. So, you know, aligning the climate and sustainability practices to the financial institutions, I really have a lot of hope for, you know, transformational change, and really excited for the vision that Michael and team have for this particular institute.
Thanks, Jamie. We have another question. Any thoughts on using green banking in the retail banking space in terms of creating new eco-friendly checking accounts, credit cards, and other payment products?
John, maybe you can take that one as part of your closing remarks.
Oh, I'm going to take notes. It's a good question. It's something we're very focused on right now. We are looking at retail specific products, especially in the credit card space. You know, how are there ways where we can align credit cards, and then importantly, you know, purchases that, you know, our customers are making on their credit cards, and one, you know, incentivize the right types of purchases, i.e. green or environmentally friendly purchases. But secondly, potentially even allow our customers to track their own carbon emissions and carbon footprints based on their purchasing patterns. Definitely something we are focused on. Similarly, we're looking across financing. there ways we can be incentivizing, residential mortgages from a green perspective, even down to term investments. If we're looking at a guaranteed investment certificate, is there a way that we can sort of tweak it to make it green aligned, or investing in green companies or green indices, et cetera? So everything's on the table as it relates to retail. And if I'm honest, I think it's the biggest opportunity for our bank and many banks, because historically ESG or environmental focuses has sort of existed in the institutional investor space. So you think of asset managers, insurance funds, different pension funds that have dedicated green investment portfolios. So that's why we've seen such growth in the green fixed income space, bonds, loans, et cetera. That's why we've seen so much inflows from institutional clients, particularly into ESG themed ETFs, mutual funds, and other more sort of private funds. But the tide is turning, and quickly. Not, I guess pun intended. The tide is turning, and I think it's really exciting to see the focus that retail have on this now. And it's not a coincidence, right? Where, millennials just care more about where their money goes, that their investments are lined up with their own personal values. We're in the midst of the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth in history, from, baby boomers to millennials as we speak. So it makes sense that, especially when you're not compensating returns through retail focused investment products. And there's a lot of academic research out there to say that you don't, in fact, compensate any returns. You're actually, if investing in the right companies, building into ones that will be over the medium to long term more profitable, all things equal. We saw major inflows into ESG ETFs and mutual funds last year, and we saw strong outperformance as well. And these are retail type investments. So I think the retail angle is really critical from a green finance perspective, and definitely one we're very focused on at BMO, and hopefully more to come very soon.
Thanks, John. We have another question, follow up. Is there consideration of capital provisioning related to climate risk? Who wants to take that one?
I can take that one. So there's a lot of consideration for this happening amongst regulators that those in the field will be familiar with, but it's a big question. So regulators are focusing on climate risk in terms of integrating the analysis of physical or transition risks into risk processes, including stress testing, which has historically been feeding into capital requirements for banks. But this is a very different creature than traditional stress testing, where it's very long term in terms of the horizon. There's a lot of assumptions around it. And so the focus has been on what they call scenario analysis, which is, if this happened, what could the effect on a client be? And therefore, what could the effect on the bank be? It's largely been done so far in an experimental way and for informational purposes, but there is a lot of debate amongst regulators about whether this should someday affect capital provisioning. So far, it hasn't evolved in that way. One question I have for Kian, maybe before we wrap up, is around the work, from your technology perspective. What have been some of the greatest challenges that you've seen in terms of implementing this kind of a solution within a bank?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I think some of the biggest challenges is working within a large institution that has its traditions and ways of doing things, and bringing in new innovative technology. Sometimes there can be hesitation for good reason, and so being able to socialize that with various teams and bringing the technology to various sectors of the bank. And I'm personally not an expert in finance, and I'm AI and computer science. And so I've learned quite a bit about adjudication and loans, more than I ever thought I would before I started working at BMO. And so really the ability to socialize the technology throughout the bank, get people on board, I think is a challenge. And as well as approaching it from a product-oriented mindset, I would say is a challenge, but also the most the most important part, because if you develop it as a product, you have the idea of who's going to use it, how it's going to be used, and what use cases it's going to solve. So to work with various teams within the bank to make sure that the technology is aligned to practical, real-world, impactful use cases is perhaps one of the more challenging parts, but also the most rewarding. Fortunately, what would be particularly challenging would be developing a massive geospatial climate data analysis system. But fortunately, Jamie and Climate Engine have done the PhD science and done the work on that front, so that we can focus more on integrating data and working with and integrating the teams into the technology. And so that being able to overcome the technological obstacle really was helped by working with Jamie's team in Climate Engine.
That's great, Keenan. Thanks. There's no other questions, so I'm going to wrap the panel up this morning. I'm really, really grateful for everyone dialing into our session this morning. I think hopefully it's clear to everyone that participated that the worlds really do collide between payments and finance and sustainability overall. And for all the people at the Payments Canada Summit, regardless of the organization you represent or the role that you're in today, you have a role to play for your own company and for your customers, just as we've highlighted today, both now and in the future. So I want to give a really warm thank you to our panelists this morning, Michael and John and Kian and Jamie, for their insights. And I wish everyone a great rest of the Payments Canada Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everybody.